Hey guys, today I want to go over the human impacts on weather and climate so you can follow along with me here. The PowerPoint also is online in case that works better for you. Okay, so as we should know already, climate is the average weather conditions over a long period of time that includes both temperature and precipitation. Okay, we should know what El Nino and La Nina are from back in day 4 when we went over those. However, here are the definitions again for you in case you need them. You can see the effects from temperature data from these as well. Okay, so a couple other things as we get into what affects climate. El Nino and La Nina were one thing, and these would be the global aspects, not necessarily the human impacts, because we can't necessarily control. While we probably can affect El Nino and La Nina due to some human interaction, most of all that is a global interaction, and a few of these will be global interactions where we actually get into the human impacts. So one would be volcanic eruptions here, so that ash and dust may block sunlight, which would overall cool global temperatures. But then in turn with that, excess CO2 that gets released into the atmosphere, since we've already talked about the greenhouse effect, will make global temperatures warmer. So that you'll go through a period of cooling and then ultimately a period of warming due to that excess CO2 and the greenhouse effect. Okay, high sunspot activities is going to increase climate temperature, and low sunspot activity is going to result in a cooler climate. Remember from back in Unit 2 when we talked about sunspots, if you need a refresher of those, go back to Unit 2, Day 5. Here you can see some data from some sunspot observations. Okay, a shift in Earth's orbit, which happens every once in a while. Again, you can go back to Unit 2 for a refresher on these things. So a slightly more circular orbit is going to result in a cooler climate because the Earth stays at the same distance around the Sun as it travels. A more elliptical orbit is going to cause the Earth to come closer to the Earth in some parts and further away in others. So it's going to result in a warmer climate when it's closer to the Sun and a cooler climate when it's further away. Okay, precession is that wobbling on the Earth's axis. That's going to intensify summer heat due to the amount of light reached at that source. All right, now we'll get into some of the human impacts here. Okay, urban heat islands. This is a hot button topic. I guarantee you will see this phrase or this topic on the final. An urban heat island is due to excessive pavement and buildings that release heat back into the atmosphere rather than plants absorbing heat. Basically what it says is that there is an increased area of heat over urbanized areas. So you can see here from this graph, over the downtown area there's increased heat because the sun's light is going to reflect off pavement, it's going to reflect off buildings and glass and all these other things that we have in cities rather than being absorbed by the ground and the grass and all of those things. So it's going to be hotter in a city than it is right outside the city, and this graph shows that. All right, burning hydrocarbons. So hydrocarbons are things like gasoline and oil and etc. So mining gasoline, oil, and then burning it releases excess CO2 because part of the reaction from burning these, from the combustion action of burning these hydrocarbons, releases CO2 back into the atmosphere. Okay, and this leads to intensified greenhouse effect and global warming. Burning wood. Same concept here, not quite a hydrocarbon, but it adds CO2 due to the burning. All right, and in a sense, the greenhouse effect is good. It helps us to regulate temperatures on the planet. If we didn't have the greenhouse effect, we would go through periods of very hot to periods of very cold. Think desert climates all the way around the Earth. However, the greenhouse effect allows us to maintain this moderate temperature that we're used to in a temperate area like North Carolina. But as always, too much of it is bad. You start to increase temperatures, and nature, the environment around you, is very sensitive to changes in temperature. All right, deforestation is something that can affect the climate because plants, as we already talked about in the carbon cycle in day 5 of this unit, plants have a very important role in the carbon cycle. So cutting down these things is going to decrease the amount of carbon recycling. Overfarming is going to have the same effect. It also can lead to things like the Dust Bowl of the 1930s from overfarming. All right, industrial byproducts. These are things that we make when we have, coming out of our factories. These are the waste of these factories. So things like sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides are out of the atmosphere, along with excess CO2 particles, which will increase both the air quality through pollution as well as the greenhouse effect. And these things can lead to acid precipitation. So when carbon mixes with water, you get something called carbonic acid. And when sulfur mixes or sulfur dioxide mixes with water, you're going to get sulfuric acid. And so these things are going to decrease the pH of water, which is going to make it more acidic and can cause these effects that you see in the picture here. Same with this. I should also mention, it said it on this slide, but any kind of precipitation that has a pH of less than 5 is considered acid precipitation. All right, we talked about CFCs already, or chlorofluorocarbons, when we watched Ozzy Ozone back on day, I believe it was 3 in this unit. So CFCs, destroy ozone in the upper atmosphere. And this means that the ozone layer is less effective at absorbing and blocking UV radiation, which could cause more skin cancer and increase temperatures in those areas. And this happens because CFCs bind to the oxygen molecules. They're oxygen dependent, and so they steal an oxygen molecule from ozone. And since ozone is 3 oxygen molecules together, you steal 1 oxygen atom from that molecule, and it now becomes atmospheric oxygen, or the type of oxygen that you breathe. And so it basically renders it ineffective. You can see the hole in the ozone layer here. We've already discussed the carbon cycle, but you can see how it plays a role in global climate change here. So what can you and your family do? And we're going to do this in class.